My name is Samantha Williams. My father Richard's third wedding looked like something out of a glossy magazine. Glittering chandeliers, arches of white roses, and a ballroom filled with guests in sparkling gowns and tailored suits. Their laughter rang out over the clink of champagne glasses, smooth and polished, almost rehearsed. Among them all, I felt like the one misplaced piece in a perfect display. My father is a senior executive at a major investment bank, a man who measures a person's worth by title and salary. I, on the other hand, joined the military straight out of high school, served my years in uniform, and later moved into private security. To him, that meant I had stepped off the right track and wasted my potential. On the evening before the ceremony, the rehearsal dinner, my father worked the room like a seasoned politician. He moved from guest to guest with an easy smile, resting one hand lightly on my shoulder as if to remind everyone I was there. Then, with a casual shrug, he introduced me. "This is my daughter. She's just a security guard." The words landed softly, but carried a sharp edge. A ripple went through the crowd, subtle, but unmistakable. One man smirked, hiding his laugh behind a sip of wine. A woman fanned herself slowly, eyes narrowing as if to study me. Another whispered, "Well, I suppose someone has to do the hands-on work," earning a stifled chuckle from her companion. I forced a polite smile, the kind you wear when every muscle wants to recoil. The stem of my glass dug into my fingers as I held on, trying to steady the nausea rising in my chest. I couldn't let my face betray me. To flinch would be to give them what they wanted. That night, a phone call from my mother was my only comfort. "Sam, you chose your own path. Be proud of that," she said gently. Her voice steadied me. I promised myself I would walk into the ceremony with my head high. The next day, during the wedding reception itself, my father repeated that same line as he introduced me again. "This is my daughter. She's just a security guard." The words barely left his mouth when a large television mounted on the ballroom wall suddenly switched to breaking news. On the screen was a live report of an attempted armed robbery that had taken place the night before at a downtown hotel. The footage showed a uniformed guard twisting a gunman's arm, shouting commands with calm precision. That guard was me. Gasps spread through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Wait, is that Samantha?" Another voice rose. "She's the one who stopped the robbery." The camera cut to the reporter. "Last night, an armed robbery at the Grand Harbor Hotel was brought under control thanks to quick action by Private Security Officer Samantha Williams. Authorities say her calm decisions saved more than a dozen lives." All eyes turned to me. The weight of their earlier mockery shifted into stunned silence. My father's face drained of color as the champagne flute slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Only the sharp chime of breaking glass echoed through the hall. I stood still, my smile gone, watching the news footage in silence. For the first time in my life, my father was seeing me not as just a security guard, but as the woman who had saved lives. The ceremony was supposed to be a perfect celebration, but it had already begun to take an unexpected turn. If you were in Samantha's place, how would you handle this moment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I had agreed to attend the wedding, but a thorn of unease stayed lodged in my chest. My father Richard was a well-known executive at a New York investment bank, a man who believed that success and status defined a person's worth. I had never fit his standards. After my parents' divorce when I was 12, that distance only grew. My mother, Audrey, a gentle schoolteacher, often told me, "Protecting people is worth more than any title." But weekends at my father's house were different. He chose my schools, my future major, even my career path. After high school, I defied those plans and enlisted in the military. I still remember the way he folded his newspaper at dinner and said, "The army? You might as well join the circus." The look in his eyes that night stayed with me for years. Only my mother said, "You're trying to stand on your own 2 feet. Be proud of that." The 4 years I spent in uniform were tough, but they showed me my own strength. I once gave up my sleeping bag to keep a teammate warm in the desert. I learned to make fast, rational decisions under fire, skills that later became invaluable in private security. After my service, I used the GI Bill to attend college, studied criminal justice by day, and worked campus security at night. Now I'm an analyst for a major security company. But to my father, I was still the daughter who never left the uniform behind. When his wedding invitation arrived, I nearly tore it up. My best friend Alicia stopped me with a grin. Go, wear a dress, walk in there and shut down his prejudice. Even my mother urged me over the phone. You know your worth. Hold your head high. I sighed, chose a navy blue dress with silver earrings, and prepared to face the weekend. The night before the ceremony, the sunset poured red gold over the ocean beyond the resort's windows. Inside, round tables covered in white linen lined the glass wall, and the center table, where my father and his bride-to-be Eleanor would sit, was crowned with lavish flowers. I had been placed at a side table, which brought a mix of relief and faint loneliness. My father moved from guest to guest, shaking hands, charming them with his smile. When he reached my table, he laid a light hand on my shoulder and said again, with that same smirk, "This is my daughter. She's just a security guard." His tone carried a trace of superiority. The guests gave polite smiles. One lady hid her eyes behind a fan and whispered, "Well, someone has to do the hands-on work." A man chuckled. Shame. She could have chosen a more glamorous path. I kept the smile glued to my face and gripped the stem of my glass until my knuckles stiffened, fighting the nausea that crept up my throat. Their laughter rang in my ears like fine glass breaking. That night, a short message from my mother reached me on my phone. "Don't lose your pride. You're stronger than you know." Her words warmed me just enough to sleep. The next morning, the resort bloomed under a clear blue sky. White tents fluttered in the sea breeze, and laughter floated from the bridal suite as staff rushed to put the final touches on the decorations. I sat quietly among the guest seats facing the ocean, trying to still the tight knot of tension inside me. Yet habit kept my eyes scanning the crowd. One of the catering staff caught my attention. The uniform was ill-fitted. The way he carried his tray was awkward. And most telling of all, his eyes kept flicking toward the entrances and the handbags of wealthy guests, rather than toward the people he served. I told myself I was imagining things, but the unease wouldn't fade. Two others with the same stiff posture exchanged brief glances with him, and a chill went down my spine. Those weren't the eyes of people enjoying a party. They were the eyes of hunters. During the ceremony, I stayed seated at the back, but kept checking the exits and the blind spots between the tables. I listened to the officiant's words as if they were background music, my focus on the crowd's movements. Up front, my father held Eleanor's hand with a look of bliss, unaware of the shadow I felt creeping in. By the time the toasts were about to begin, the sense of danger had solidified. I saw the same suspicious staff gathering near the side aisle, exchanging silent signals. I stepped away from my seat and quietly found the head of the venue's security, showed my credentials, and warned him, "We may have armed robbers here. Call the police." He blinked at me in surprise, but quickly used his radio to alert his team and placed the call. The dispatcher said it would take at least 20 minutes for officers to arrive. The ceremony was already at its peak, too late to stop everything. My father, unaware, stood smiling as the vows were spoken. The sunset lit the hem of Eleanor's white dress a deep, ominous red. The seaside marquee that evening looked as if it had been blown from molten amber and cooled by the sea breeze. Crystal chandeliers swallowed the reflection of the tide and scattered it back in tiny prisms across the white-clothed tables. A swing band played a mellow Sinatra number, and champagne foam fizzed on glass rims like punctuation at the end of every polite laugh. But beneath that music, my instincts heard another sound, a low, dry, rhythmic ticking. It was the metronome of danger. those seated among the guests in a navy dress instead of my usual uniform. My gaze swept the room with trained precision. I noted the fall of each spotlight, the distance to the nearest exit, the space between tables wide enough to crouch or sprint, and the blind spots where a gunman might hide. 3 supposed catering staff caught my eye. Their smiles looked glued on. Their eyes moved too quickly, predatory. Their trays tilted from the wrist instead of the shoulder, sloppy, not like seasoned waiters. Most telling, their glances strayed not toward the speeches or the bride, but toward the doorways and the expensive handbags and jewelry left near the aisle. I exhaled slowly to steady the beat in my chest. Jenkins, the head of security, had been warned. The call to the police was already placed. Earliest arrival, 20 minutes. The ceremony was in full swing. There was no stopping it now. All I could do was brace for the first strike. Eleanor, radiant in her ivory gown, slipped her hand lightly around my father's arm as the band shifted into a livelier tempo for the toasts. The master of ceremonies lifted the microphone and told a cheerful anecdote about champagne bubbles carrying wishes to the heavens. Laughter rippled through the tent. That was the moment when the world slowed to a single stretched out second. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the hem of a jacket lift. A flash of metal caught the dying sun outside the tent wall. The gun's barrel gleamed with the last ray of light like a shard of ice. My chair screeched backward as I rose and expelled all the air in my lungs in a single shout. Gun. The entire tent seemed to swap soundtracks at once. Laughter snapped into screams. The pop of a champagne cork blended with the crack of glass shattering on the floor. A vase tipped over, scattering tulips midair. Petals drifted like red gold confetti caught in the sunset. The leader of the armed men fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Compressed air punched my eardrums. The crystal prisms in the chandelier trembled as if they, too, had screamed. Nobody move. Do as we say if you want to live. I crouched low but kept my vision sweeping the hall, mentally drawing a grid map. Leader. Calm, gun steady. The most dangerous. Second man. Sloppy trigger discipline. Muzzle wavering toward the guests on the right. Third. Breathing too fast. Jittery. Highest risk of a panic shot. Priority. Protect the elderly, the children, and anyone trapped by long gowns near the aisle. Best escape route. East Service Corridor, blocked for now by overturned chairs. I inhaled for 4 counts, held for 4, exhaled for 4. Combat breathing to slow my heart. Stay cold. Quick decisions need a slow mind. Behind me, an elderly lady began to hyperventilate, clutching her chest. Her husband froze, helpless. The gunman on the right snarled and aimed at them. Shut her up. I raised both hands, pushing my voice forward, but keeping my body still. Wait, I'm trained as a medic. Let me calm her down. Don't shoot. His eyes scanned me up and down, hands visible. No weapon, no sudden moves. He jerked his chin. Hurry. No talking. Keeping low, I slid next to the old woman, laid a hand lightly between her shoulders, and whispered the drill. In hold out 4 counts each. You're safe behind this wall. I am the wall before the wall. Words can be medicine if measured right. Her breathing slowed. The tremor in her fingers eased. The gunman, bored now that the noise subsided, shifted his focus elsewhere. The ringleader had chosen new prey. He yanked the jewel tiara from Eleanor's head, then grabbed my father by the lapels and jammed the pistol's cold barrel against his temple. The vault code. Now. Father's voice cracked. It's in my phone. No phones. Say it. Out loud. Heat like molten iron pooled in my gut. All the years of his scorn and dismissal threatened to surge up my throat. I shoved them down. Feelings could wait. Saving him could not. I studied the leader's stance. Weight pitched forward. Trigger finger taut, but elbow unanchored, exposed. Across the hall, Jenkins caught my eye. His subtle nod meant, timing's yours. I pitched my voice calm, laced half-truth with bait. The code's logged in the front desk master list. I can fetch it. No need to risk shouting wrong numbers. No. Say it. Here. You want the money to cash out clean, right? Do it sloppy and you lower your own payout. A flicker of calculation crossed his face. Exactly the pause I needed. I moved. Left foot forward, right foot pivoting back. My palm hooked his gun wrist from the outside. Twisting thumb side up to unseat the trigger grip. I dropped my weight onto his shoulder, levering his elbow outward. The joint locked with a dry pop. His balance spilled forward. The weapon broke free. Even before I heard the gun clatter to the floor, a rush of air behind me warned of the second man raising his pistol. A shot cracked. White-hot pain seared through my upper arm. It felt as though someone had pressed burning steel into my skin. But my legs held. I refused to fall. I wrenched the leader in front of me as a human shield, shifted half a step sideways to narrow my profile, eyes already tracking the others. Jenkins' two men launched simultaneously, one snapping a baton lock over the second gunman's wrist, the other sweeping the third man's knees from behind with a low tackle. Metal clanged, a man groaned. The canvas floor creaked under their weight. The crowd's screaming didn't stop, but the pitch shifted, from despair black to ash gray, edging toward relief. A final gunman burst from behind the bar, dragging a young female staffer by the collar and pressing the muzzle to her throat. His breath came too fast. His eyes skittered everywhere, cornered animal, blood sliding warm beneath my sleeve. I nodded once at Jenkins. Not yet. We had to talk this one down or risk a last tragedy. I stepped forward, palms displayed, boots rolling heel to ball over the slightly greasy kitchen tiles. It doesn't have to end this way. The police have the place surrounded. Put the gun down now, and it stays robbery, not murder. Stay back. The hostage's tear-filled eyes met mine. She still had reason behind the fear. With a single blink, I signaled her the same 4-count breath. Inhale, hold, exhale, to steady her panic. To the man, I kept offering choices. Your real goal is to walk out alive, isn't it? One more pull of that trigger changes your charge to attempted murder. Right now, it's just armed robbery. You still have a chance to cut the loss. The gun is only a tool. Don't let the tool decide your life. A silence stretched. The hum of the refrigerator motor felt loud enough to fill the entire hall. I eased half a step sideways, shifting the angle of the overhead light, so my silhouette blurred at the edges. A trick to break his tunnel vision. His shoulders slumped, just a fraction. That was the opening. I lunged, chopping down on his gun wrist, thumb snapping the weapon loose, spun the girl behind my back, then used my shoulder to drive his knees out from under him. The floor groaned as he went down, cursing. From outside came the barked commands of the arriving police unit. The remaining resistance folded in seconds. One by one, suspects were cuffed and hauled out. Slowly, the tent began to breathe again, first with sobs, then with prayers, finally with stunned silence. Shattered glass on the carpet glittered faintly with the last strands of sunset. Flower stems drooped out of toppled vases, but the sea breeze still threaded through the marquee as though nothing had happened. I slumped back against the wall, adjusting the makeshift tourniquet around my arm. The throbbing pain sharpened now that adrenaline ebbed, but I refused to label it. Naming pain makes it louder. Paramedics entered. I waved them toward an elderly lady first, keeping myself for last. When one insisted, I laughed lightly. Just a graze. I'm still on my feet. In the corner of my eye, I caught Father watching, his arm around Eleanor, his gaze fixed on me not as the guard in uniform, but as the one who acted. Lights brightened. Yellow hazard tape went up around the disturbed areas. A paramedic wrapped my arm as he rattled off questions. Dizziness? Nausea? None. Vision clear. Mild ringing in the ear. Adrenaline crash will chill you. Take a blanket. Thanks. She needs it first. I gestured toward the rescued waitress, who had begun copying my measured breathing. If people can reclaim their breathing rhythm, I believe, they can often reclaim themselves. Outside, the sirens faded. The evening sky beyond the tent shifted from bruised red to deepening blue. For the first time all night, I felt a single thread of tension slide out from my spine. The fight was over, but the ripples of what happened here were only beginning to spread. I woke the next morning still in the hotel, my injured arm wrapped tight beneath clean white bandages. Through the window, I could see reporters gathered outside, their camera flashes scattering across the glass like brief bursts of lightning. Overnight, my name had become a headline. Ex-military female guard stops armed robbery at wedding banquet. Heroine who saved the bride was the groom's own daughter. Down in the lobby, the press crowded the front desk, while the staff tried in vain to keep order. I stepped out of the elevator, forcing my expression calm, even though my arm throbbed with each heartbeat. Waiting by the entrance was my mother. "Sam, are you all right?" Her small frame wrapped me in a hug. "I'm fine," I said with a faint smile. "Just a graze." She searched my face, then sighed in relief. "I'm just glad you're safe." My father Richard waited at a corner table in the breakfast hall, still in yesterday's suit, a folded newspaper shielding a drawn, tired face. He looked up as I approached, started to speak, then shut the paper and cleared his throat. "About last night." His voice was low, uncertain. "Thank you," he added, the words almost reluctant. I shrugged lightly. "I was only doing my job." He nodded but said no more, sipping his coffee in silence. Then he tapped the front page of the newspaper. There I was, captured mid-motion as I pinned down the ringleader. In a corner of the same photo stood my father, half shielding the bride with his arm. "I never imagined you could move like that," he murmured, eyes narrowing in a mix of regret and astonishment. By noon, we sat in the hotel lounge watching the news coverage. The anchor recapped the entire ordeal. A clip rolled of Eleanor, the bride, speaking through tears. "If she hadn't been there, we might not be here today. Samantha is my lifesaver." A bright subtitle below the video read, "City to consider public bravery award for female guard." I shifted uncomfortably, but kept my gaze on the screen. Beside me, Father gripped his champagne flute so tightly his knuckles showed white. I noticed the tremor in his fingers, but said nothing. That night, he summoned me to the hotel's bar lounge. He had loosened his tie and was staring out at the dark sea beyond the glass. "Sam," his voice was rough. "Yesterday, I introduced you as just a security guard. The shameful truth is, I really believe that." I stood beside him, letting the silence rest a heartbeat before answering. "I don't do this job to earn your approval," I said quietly. A rueful smile flickered on his face. "I know, but when I saw you standing between us and those guns, I realized I'd been blind all these years." He lowered his head slightly. "I despise the path you chose. That was my mistake. I'm sorry." For a moment, I couldn't find any words. The apology was unexpected, strangely disarming. "I won't forget what you did last night," he added at last. "I owe you." A few days later, the police held a small commendation ceremony. Photos of the event made the front pages of several newspapers. Online, headlines bloomed like wildfire. "The modern-day Joan of Arc, a real-life hero emerges at seaside wedding." Clips from the venue's security cameras circulated on social media, drawing millions of views and comments. Though the attention felt overwhelming, I drew comfort from the flood of messages sent by colleagues and old friends. One came from Alicia. "Forget ball gowns. Battle gear suits you better. You were incredible out there." I laughed when I texted back. "I was hoping for compliments on my dress for once, but I'll take it." That evening, Father invited me to dinner at a quiet seaside restaurant. He poured us each a glass of wine, his expression softer than I had seen in years. "When you were a child," he said slowly, "I believed success and titles were everything. When you enlisted, I thought you'd thrown your future away. But tonight, I can honestly say I'm proud." I twirled the glass by its stem, a small smile forming. "Thank you. All I ever wanted was to protect people." For a while he said nothing, only watching the candlelight shimmer across the wine. Finally he exhaled. "Let's promise each other we'll be a little more honest from now on." The warmth of that simple statement spread quietly through my chest. The wall that had stood between us for years felt thinner somehow, almost fragile enough to step across. We left the restaurant and strolled the boardwalk by the sea. The night air carried a soft, salt-tinged breeze that tugged gently at my hair. "Eleanor is grateful to you as well," Father said suddenly. "She told me your courage moved her deeply." I kept my eyes on the dark horizon of the water and replied, "I'm glad to hear that." He chuckled under his breath. "I really am grateful you were there," he added, almost as if to himself. For once, I believed him. Weeks later, life settled back into routine. Yet, every now and then I'd recall the night of the siege. Not the chaos or the headlines, but the quiet words my father spoke at the water's edge. They lingered in my memory, like a small, unseen lighthouse on a distant shore. The city police headquarters smelled faintly of polished wood and camera flash powder. When I stepped up on stage and accepted the framed certificate, the air cracked with the flicker of reporters' flashes. The mayor's voice carried warmly across the hall. "Today we honor a citizen who showed uncommon bravery. Samantha Williams is a model of courage for this city." For a brief moment, I felt a lift of pride. Then an awkward weight settled in. I wasn't a superhero, just a trained professional who happened to be in the right place and did her job. After the ceremony, my fellow officers clapped me on the back, offering good-natured jokes and congratulations. That night, a text from Alicia blinked on my phone. Not in a gown this time, getting an award in uniform instead. "So very Sam." I chuckled, replying, "Wouldn't have minded a fancier trophy for once." A few days later, I stopped by my childhood home. Waiting for me on the table was an envelope in my father's handwriting, slanted, uneven strokes that somehow made my chest tighten. Inside was a single sheet. "To Sam, that night I might have lost my life if you hadn't been there. I'm proud of you, and I regret my past words. I finally understand the path you chose was never wrong. Thank you, Richard." I folded the letter carefully, feeling a quiet warmth spread through my chest. That evening I had dinner at my mother's place. She eyed my arm, now free of its bandage, and smiled with obvious relief. "Still the same Sam, always moving first to protect someone." I laughed softly. "Just living up to your lessons, Mom." Pouring us each a glass of wine, she added, "Your father seems to have changed a little, hasn't he? He wrote me a letter. He actually apologized." Her eyes softened and she smiled. "I'm glad to hear that." One cool evening, Father invited me to a small restaurant overlooking the harbor. Beyond the window, the lighthouse beams swept across the dark water in slow arcs, and the tide whispered against the pier. He turned his wineglass slowly between his fingers before speaking. "Sam, from now on I want you to walk your path with your head high. I won't stand in your way anymore. And if it's possible, I'd like us to be a family again." I was taken aback, then smiled. The bond was never cut, Dad. We'd only stepped apart for a while. Relief softened his face. "Thank you," he murmured. The aftermath of the incident left me not only with headlines, but also a new determination. I wanted to sharpen my crisis management skills even further to protect more lives. When my company offered to sponsor advanced training, I accepted without hesitation. One weekend night, I met Alicia again at a cozy bar near the waterfront. She grinned as she clinked her glass against mine. "So, finally feeling settled?" "A little," I said, "though somehow I feel I've found even more I want to do." "You're hopeless, born to be the hero," she teased. I raised my glass, laughing. "I'll keep moving forward, but always as myself." Several weeks later, we were both invited to speak at a charity gala. When Father stood at the podium beneath the crystal lights, I watched from the back of the hall. "I have a brave daughter," he began. "For years I believed in nothing but titles and success, and I belittled her choices. But the night she saved my life, I learned that true worth lies in courage. I'm proud of my daughter." As applause filled the room, he looked up and found my eyes. We exchanged the smallest nod, enough to say everything. Walking back along the harbor afterward, the wind off the water brushed my cheek, I texted my mother a short note. I'm okay now. I feel as if I finally let go of the past. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and gazed at the lighthouse flashing across the horizon. Its steady beam looked like a signpost pointing the way toward the future. In overcoming prejudice and repairing the bond with her father, Samantha has closed one chapter and begun another. How would you mend old wounds in your own family story? Share your thoughts in the comments.